just joining, please go ahead and get Canvas open. We're going to be working on the Module 7 project today. So I'll give it like another minute or two, let people join. And we're just literally going to work through the first 4 tasks, and then tomorrow we'll work through the rest, okay? And like I said, I'm not necessarily giving you the answer, but I'll help you come up with evidence and some bullet points that you can use then to help create your paragraph response for each task, okay? So this is a real opportunity to get a good grade in the summative category. So if you struggle with taking quizzes, if the timed assessments are not your thing, then projects should be your best friend, right? Because this is an easy way to kind of like, there's no time limit on it. You can control what your answer is. And we'll go over the rubrics a bit today too. Did everybody have a good 3-day weekend? I don't know. Yesterday was kind of nice. Like we haven't had class since last Thursday. So it's like Friday, kind of got started early, and then Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And then yesterday got to ease back into it with a small group day. So definitely was nice. And then next weekend we get to do the same, right? Monday off, at least for all of you. Lucky ducks. Good morning. If you're just joining, go ahead and get Canvas open. We'll get started here in about 30 seconds. Good morning. Hope everybody's doing well. If you're just joining, go ahead and get Module 7 open. All right, I'm going to get started because it'll take us a bit of time to get through each task, and we want to be able to spend as much time on each one as possible. So again, hope you had a wonderful weekend and you're doing really well. I know my background looks probably a little weird. I have family in town, so just like first semester, I'm stuck in the corner of my room, kind of hiding out from the people in my house. So joys of working from home or doing school from home, right? Sometimes you have to find a corner that's quiet and stuff when you got a lot of things going on. So this week, yes, yeah, it's great to have family in town, but it's always a little hairy when it's like middle of the work week. You're like, thanks for being here, but I'm trying to I gotta work. But I'm glad they're here and stuff. Okay, so yeah, I hear you for sure. We are going to Module 7 project was technically due yesterday, but we didn't have class Monday, and Friday's a catch-up day. So I thought let's for sure use this time in class to work on this. So honestly, if you didn't start it yesterday, that's fine. But that means focus in class today and tomorrow. You can honestly get a lot of this done so that Friday you just finish it up and you get it in. All right. And this is a great opportunity to get your summative grade up because again, it's not timed and the rubrics is really clear and you can control what you answer. All right. So let's work on that. Really quick for our bell ringer. I thought this one would be kind of fun. Yesterday was National Bootlegger Day. Does anybody know what time period in our history we had bootlegging and maybe what amendment this was associated with? This picture should be a hint. 1920s, very good, JD. Yes, 1920s. So after World War I ended, there was this huge outcry to make what illegal? Does anybody know? It's legal today. It's similar to that. It infers, so bootlegging is like the old term for smuggling, basically. So bootlegging, we kind of use the term today, smuggling. Prohibition, very good, Lucy. You guys are awesome. Yes, alcohol was prohibited. All right. So right after World War I, a lot of soldiers were coming home, and honestly, they didn't label it at the time. Now we call it PTSD, right? They're traumatized from war, horrible experience. So a lot of people, to handle, what was so difficult and stuff, they unfortunately drank a lot, and it was kind of a way to numb themselves, medicate themselves, so to speak, because they didn't have the mental health resources back then that we do now. These things weren't really acknowledged, and it was such a bloody war with weapons that just did such devastation. So the 18th Amendment, very close. 21st was really close. The 18th Amendment prohibited the consumption of alcohol, the sale or consumption of alcohol. So this is where the mob, so kind of the historical mob as we hear about it in the United States, really got its start. So like Chicago, New York, Buffalo, things like that. You know, these parts in the Northeast where, I mean, we definitely have mob history here in Las Vegas, but that comes a little bit later, like 1950s, 60s, and stuff. So in the 1920s, the mob, like when you talk about the historic classic mob, not just going back to Europe, but you know, roots in the United States, Chicago, New York, prohibition, what it was called, the prohibiting of alcohol after the 18th Amendment was their business. So before it was smuggling in drugs, it was smuggling in alcohol. This was the main order of business, that and gambling. So gambling and alcohol. Yes, yes. So it was later repealed. It was later repealed and stuff. So and stuff. But it was later repealed, but this was a big thing in the 1920s. Okay, so the roaring 20s where everybody's having fun and we're progressing and technology's coming along. Actually, it was illegal to drink in public or to buy alcohol. Now, here's an interesting one. Okay, so when we think of smuggling and stuff like that, we often don't think of this country today. Anybody want to know where we got most of our illegal alcohol during the 1920s? I'll give you a hint. What borders the Northeast? So think Chicago, New York, Buffalo, like that area in the Northeast of the United States. What would be the closest outside contact, very good, JD, to get alcohol? Canada. So actually, most of the smuggling, the illegal booze that were the illegal alcohol that was coming into the country was coming from Canada. Canada was our supplier, so to speak, and stuff during that era because drugs was not really the focus at the time. Alcohol was the focus, and they had what was called speakeasies, these illegal bars where people would gather to drink. They say even in the White House at this time that they had a secret bar where there was drinking and stuff like that. Yeah, so yesterday was National Bootlegger Day, talking about prohibition and the, again, bootlegging, kind of that old term for smuggling, or today I think we use more like black market. You know, like when I hear that, I think of like some dark place on the web or some, you know, back alley where there's, you know, shady business going down and you're like, this shouldn't be happening, you know. But bootlegging was the illegal transport of that alcohol, and the mob was the main facilitator of that. So this is where they really get their start, at least in the United States and stuff. So interesting, huh? And stuff. So just 100 years ago, you know, things were very different. So all right, we're going to look at tasks 1 through 4 on your project today. The project is called Are Students Protected by the First Amendment? And can anybody remember, we talked last week and the week before quite a bit about civil rights, civil liberties, right? What the government does to protect us, and then civil liberties, what are in place to protect us from government. And we talked quite a bit about those first 10 amendments, right? The Bill of Rights, and what are some of those freedoms we have. And remember that freedom isn't just an open card. There are limitations on that, right? There are boundaries to all these, you know, where when you infringe on someone else's rights, and depending on which amendment you're talking about, what those limitations would be. Some are easier to define than others. And this is why we have all these court cases where we've seen that questioning go the distance. So we have the Supreme Court to kind of give us guidance on specific examples of that, because sometimes they're very open-ended or they're interpretive, right? They're more figurative. And you're like, yeah, but literally, where is that limit? And there's often cases then where it's that gray area and we have to decipher. So we're going to look at the first 4 tasks. We'll look at the instructions and the rubrics. Before we do that, really quick, can anybody tell me in the chat, can anybody remember how many freedoms were in the First Amendment alone? We did this last week in your notebook, and you actually had to list them. There was a slideshow, and you had to list those first freedoms in the First Amendment. Does anybody remember how many freedoms were in the First Amendment? Anybody take a guess? How many freedoms were in the First Amendment? Very good, JD. You're on fire today. JD, yes. Okay, 5, right? So we had speech, religion, protest, assembly, and petition. Okay, so, speech, religion, symbolic speech, protest or assembly, and then petition. Okay, the right to petition. So these 5 major protections that we have under the First Amendment. So the question that we're going to dive into a little bit more, and we did this some last week when we looked at specific court cases and how they affect students, is what rights do you have that are protected under that First Amendment? In those 5 freedoms, you have those freedoms, but they are definitely more limited than, say, when you're over 18 and you're out of school, right? So when you're under 18 and you're within the institution of school and things like that, what are the limitations on your freedoms? Okay, those five major freedoms, and along with others, but this project is going to focus on the First Amendment and those five freedoms. Okay, and so each task will kind of look at elements of that. Sometimes it'll be really clear and tell us really definitively, and sometimes it will call the question like it depends, and we don't know, and we can kind of discuss that. All right, so let's get started. All right, so if you go into Canvas, all right, so you should open up Canvas and we're going to be going to modules. All right, we're going to be going to modules. Really quick, because I've been getting some emails about this. If you need to check your grade, please rely on the grades tab here in Canvas. Okay, that's going to have your most accurate grade. I see Infinite Campus is really slow to update. So if you need to check your grade, please make sure that you're going to the grade tab for any of your classes in Infinite Campus. That's where you'll get the most up-to-date, accurate grade. Okay. And don't worry about IC. At the end of this semester or end of the quarter, we make sure that the Canvas grade matches IC. And if it doesn't, then we fix it. All right. So often they're off. One will show a little bit different than the other, but Canvas is the accurate grade. Oh, it's locked. Okay. I think there's a setting I got to change. Let me write that down. All right. There's a setting that I think it's clicked. So I'll go in and make sure that gets changed today. All right. So that you can, I'll try to do it during one of the videos. All right. And stuff. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll get it done. All right. Thanks for letting me know. Okay. So when we're in Canvas, all right. And once I get that unlocked today, I'll go in and change that setting and stuff. This is where you'll find your grade. So let's go to module. And we're going to scroll down and we're going to go to module 7. Okay. Module 7. Oop, I went too far. Okay. So we did module 7, lesson 1, module 7, lesson 2. We're going to be on the project right here. Okay. And then this is the instruction page, and this is where you turn it in. So we're going to really work off of this first page. And then this is where the rubrics is and where you turn it in. Okay. So let's go to the protections under the First Amendment. Okay. So, and it's literally, you just go step by step by step by step. So it's pretty straightforward, but we'll definitely work on that. So some of the questions we're going to be answering: what is the difference between Tinker and Fraser standards of freedom of speech? And we'll look at that in tasks 3 and 4, different court cases where you see different examples of speech. One is symbolic speech, one is verbal speech, and what the examples of where the school can't overstep or infringe on your rights, but where the school can draw boundaries. Okay. We're going to look at does the no prior restraint rule apply to students? So we'll look at that in task 5 tomorrow. So we'll open up class with that one tomorrow. How does the Supreme Court determine the limits of students' rights? So we'll talk about some of those standards, and we'll discuss that a little bit today and even more tomorrow. And can school officials exert control over use of social media? And this again is going to be some tasks later on, and then in task 1 we'll kind of talk about where, again, this is a real gray area, and it's it depends, and then talk about some of those examples. Okay, so let's download our worksheet. So go ahead and click on the worksheet for the assignment. All right, and then open the copy. So once you have it open, then we're going to do the things just like we do when we do our notebook. Okay, we're going to change the name. So maybe put your last name in there, or just get rid of the copy of. You're going to save it to your Google Drive, to your government folder. All right, so save it to your Google Drive, your government folder, and then please make it shareable. Okay, so make it shareable, anyone with the link. So you click down and anyone with the link. Okay, and by the way, you guys have been doing such a good job of this. When I have been grading, I haven't had a single one so far where I've had to message somebody and be like, make this shareable. And so I really appreciate you being good about that. Well, it's not supposed, you're supposed to go through this worksheet and do each task. So I don't want an essay. I want the task sheet, because you have to address each individual part. And it literally. Okay, so if you need to, what you could do is you can copy and paste from your write-up and just put it into the worksheet. And then if you already submitted it, resubmitted it, or just, you know what I mean? Because if you did the tasks, then you should have those responses right on your paper, and then you can just copy and paste them into the worksheet. Okay, then you could just copy and paste them in. Okay, and that way, or adjust a little bit if you need to, but that way you're not having to redo all the work. Okay, you can just modify it a little bit. Okay. All right, once you have that open, all right, we're going to go down and we're going to look at task 1. Okay, so read through the article, lawsuit, Black teens unfairly expelled. Write a paragraph about did the rap video cause a distraction for other students? So we have to answer that question. That's going to be in part A. And then does the school have the right to expel students for that activity on social media? So we'll kind of talk about part A and part B and address both of these questions. Okay. Then in task 2, we're going to look at the First Amendment and give kind of a brief summary of some of the guidelines for that with students. This is more, kind of big scale. And then we're going to look at 2 specific cases, task 3 and task 4, Tinker versus Des Moines and Bethel versus Frazier, of examples where the courts make rulings on the limitations of student speech. One is symbolic speech, one is verbal speech. Okay. And where is that line within schools? So just yet further defining where students have the right to express themselves, but also when the school can suppress those rights or limit, I should say, those rights. Okay. Let's look at the rubrics super fast. All right, so let's go to the next page. All right, so this is submission page. And if we scroll down, then we can see a few things. So it was due yesterday. And again, no big deal if you didn't get it in. We're going to work on it today, tomorrow, or if you already submit it, you can resubmit it. All right, if you want to make some modifications or things like that, you're totally able to do that. All right. And it's available till the 31st. So I've opened this up for 2 weeks. So you have lots of time to get this done. This is such a great opportunity to get your grade up. Okay. So if you didn't do very well in the first 2 quizzes, if time quizzes aren't really your thing, these projects, you don't want to skip out on them. All right. It's such a good opportunity to get your grade up because it's free response, right? And the rubrics is right there. And I kind of been letting you in on how I grade it. So for task 1, the first question, one full paragraph is fine. When it says 1 to 2 paragraphs, I'm fine if it's a full paragraph. When I say a full paragraph, that means 5 sentences. Okay. So, good morning, Miss Carter. And stuff. So I mean 5 sentences. So 5 sentences, good sentences, not just, it wasn't fair. This was wrong. Like it needs to be legit high school, college sentences. You know what I'm saying? All right. So I'm fine with 1 paragraph to get full points. But now when I say I want a solid paragraph, what do I mean by that? So what I mean by that is I want evidence. Okay. So I want either, things summary from, so you can summarize or give an example from the source. Okay. So whatever, if it's an article or whatever it is you're having to work with, and that's going to be true for a lot of parts of this rubric. So not just task 1. Okay. So when I say, this is what I'm looking for, kind of keep that in mind. Okay. Task B, again, fully answering the question. 1 paragraph is fine. You can do 2. You could do 2 shorter ones if you want, but make sure you're getting that 5-6 sentence requirement there. All right. And that's the English, your English teacher standard of a paragraph. Okay. What a paragraph would equate to. Task 2, this is summarizing the First Amendment. So again, about a paragraph, 5 sentences or paragraph. Okay. So again, giving evidence from the First Amendment. What is the First Amendment? And maybe what are some of those limitations? Okay. Task 3, we're going to look at court case of Tinker. When it says 2 full paragraphs, I'm fine with 1. I'm fine with 1 paragraph. Okay. Answering the question about how they define the freedom of speech. And then you have to identify what kind of speech is in this court case. So is it verbal speech? Is it symbolic, religious speech? Is it protest? Is it, petition? What type of speech is that court case covering? And then basically the same thing for task 4. Okay. So the Bethel versus Frazier, what was the outcome of the court case and defining the limitation on students' rights? And then again, really quick, and this can just be a sentence when it's the identify, it can just be a sentence. What kind of speech is this court case an example of? Is it verbal speech, symbolic speech, religious speech? Is it, or freedom of religion? Is it protest, or is it petition? Okay. So, and then we'll go over the rest of it tomorrow. All right. So 8 points for the summary and kind of example of how the court cited, and then 2 points for each one for identifying what type of speech the court case is covering. All right. So we're going to go back to the previous page. And we're going to start on task 1. Okay. So read through the article and write a paragraph. Did the rap video cause a distraction to students? And does the school have a right to expel them for their activities? So I'm going to click on the article. And so here's what I'm going to do. I am going to read through it really quick for you to kind of keep us all on the same track. And here's what I want you to look for. Okay. Look for evidence of, does it disrupt the school? And if so, does it cause a distraction at the school? And if so, does it cause a distraction for other students? So if so, what is that distraction? So evidence, so yes or no, and then evidence that would back up your yes or no. Okay. And then the second part, does the school have the right to expel the students for social media activity? Well, in this case, specifically, we're going to have to look at what happens and do we have enough evidence to make a decision, or what evidence would we need to make a decision? Is this racial profiling, or is this students that were rightfully expelled? Okay, and that's kind of what we're looking at. The lawsuit alleges that they were profiled and therefore targeted in a generalization, in a racial generalization, and stuff, and expelled because of their race, and stuff. So kind of, making these derogatory distinctions, or saying, oh, you have a tendency toward this, so racial profiling, versus was there evidence to maybe support, no, this happened, therefore you're expelled. So let's look really quick at this article. Okay. So kind of take note or look at what evidence is there, or maybe what evidence is lacking. Okay. So it says lawsuit, Black teens unfairly expelled from Ohio school after making music rap video. So parents of 4 Black teens say that the students were expelled for making rap video, and they were suing for $25,000 in a federal lawsuit filed Tuesday, alleging, so this is in 2014, it's about 8 years ago, in an Ohio school district for being unfairly targeted purely because of their race. The lawsuit against the Northwest Local School District and Township in Ohio stems from an April 2014 incident when the school was abuzz with rumors of gang activity. The lawsuit alleges that on April 10th, school and police officials interrogated Black students about their social media activity, affiliations with other Black students, the Associated Press reported. According to the lawsuit, the students were shown images of them in a rap video. So it sounds like some students got together, did some kind of rap video, put it on social media. And then, of course, students at school are seeing it, and then they're being questioned about it because the content sounds like it's questionable. Okay. So based on these images, school administrators accused more than a dozen African-American students of making street signs and belonging to gangs in the lawsuit. Additionally, the lawsuit claims that white students did similar things, were left unquestioned and unpunished. Okay, so that's what the plaintiffs are accusing of. Okay, so here's the defense. Okay, so listen to the defense. The district attorney told the Inquirer that the lawsuit includes major inaccuracies. Students of other races, not just Black, were suspended and expelled. Kokani, so the name of the district attorney, told the Associated Press that 14 students in all faced disciplinary actions on April 14th, mainly for threats made against staff and teachers, so staff and students, on social media or at the school, and that it wasn't related to gang activity or the rap videos specifically. Extra police were on presence April 11th, the day after, and 100 parents picked up their kids early, or picked up their kids when rumors of gang activity abound. The school even sent home a letter explaining the situation and why there was extra police presence, and made vague mention of gang activity. The parents suing the school district also want the expulsions taken off their record, because if you are expelled, it can stay on your record. The students referred to themselves these students referred to themselves as the Money Gang, and their parents said it was just a group of athletes coming together, and it's not a real gang. It is not a crime to be an African-American teenager, the lawsuit states. Yet in April 10, 2014, school administrators coordinated with the police and acted as if they were. Rap and music have become a battleground for schools and disciplinary. In 2010, there was an incidence of a rap song and a teen being suspended for that. And then another instance of a teacher in 2010 in Florida, using explicit lyrics from a Lil Wayne song in class, and whether or not that was appropriate. And another teacher in Washington, and whether or not that was appropriate. Okay, so looking at this and stuff, let's look at task 1, all right? And let's start to kind of come up with some ideas, okay? So a minimum of 1 paragraph, and did the rap video cause a distraction to other students? So what do you think? Let's start with yes or no. Did it cause a distraction? So we aren't getting now to did the school have grounds for expulsion, but did it cause a distraction? I mean, what evidence in the article would support yes or no? So what do we think? Can we respond in the chat or unmute? Yes or no? Was it a distraction? Was this incident of this rap video? It's hard to tell if it's one video, if there's several. Obviously, the lawsuit's only about one, but it sounds like from what the plaintiffs are saying that there was a couple videos. or more people involved than just the 4 parents and the 4 teens? So what do we think? Okay, come on, you guys. Response would be wonderful. Yes
It's
or no?
Wednesday. It's Wednesday.
Come
School,
on.
the
We're
week's
getting our
almost
work done
over.
together. The least you
Yeah,
can
where's our
do
energy,
is
Miss
say
Hall?
yes
Where's
or no.
our energy?
I don't know. The first period was the same. I had to be like, come on, come on. Technically, yes. Okay, yeah, I think there's evidence to say yes, right? And what evidence could we put, right? Over 100 parents showed up to pick up their kids. I don't know about you. In my 12 years, in my 13th year of teaching, I've never had 100 parents show up to pick up their kids. All right. Unless there's like some crucial incident at school, but I've never had that. Okay. So 100 parents showed up to pick up kids. So something big was going around the school. We all know how rumors fly, right? Something big was going around the school. Okay. And stuff. Extra police presence. Again, in my 12 years in brick and mortar, when the few instances where there was extra police presence, there was a threat or something made. Well, let's get into that. We'll get into that. Yeah, we're just answering this one part really quick. Okay. Extra police presence. And it's hard because we don't know a lot of things. Like, was there a history of issues with gangs at the school? So maybe they were a little extra sensitive of that. Have they had violent interactions at the school recently? So there's a lot of things we don't know that would help us to maybe come up with basically follow the questions where the links were. Okay, well, we're working out right now, so you can kind of take some of these notes. So take some of these notes that I'm pulling out. So there was a distraction in the school. The school was definitely, aroused, or kind of on heightened. Parents are showing up. The school had to send home a letter about it. Extra police presence. So there's definitely some. Okay. There's definitely some evidence to suggest that this does cause a disruption, but disruption doesn't necessarily mean expulsion. Okay, so there is a distinction, and stuff. So the video could be inappropriate, but that doesn't mean that it's grounds for expulsion. Okay, and we'll get into that. Where again, like JD said, is it profiling? Because the lawsuit is claiming it's only the 4, but then we do see in the rebuttal that they're saying that other students of other backgrounds were also involved in this. You know what I mean? So just because you have dominantly one doesn't mean it's profiling, but it could mean it's profiling. It's context, right? So that's what we need to talk about. Context is important. Just because someone claims it could be true, maybe not. You have the evidence. That's why evidence is so important. That's why it's so important that we don't just read a headline and we get into the details of it a little bit. Okay, so for number 1, there's certainly evidence of some disruption. Extra police presence, which in my 13 years of teaching, that usually that something's got to happen or concern or a threat or something to bring in. And they did mention that there was mentions of students and staff threatened in this social media post. Okay, so they definitely make that clear. There's some, and we don't know what the threat was. We don't know if it's just mentioning students, if it's just talking mean about them, or I'm going to come to school and hurt them. So we don't know in what context, but they do mention that there is threats made, and so that's concerning. Parents showing up, letters sent home. Okay, so these are some of the things that you could reference or talk about, where there's definitely evidence of a disruption at school. All right, so there's definitely evidence for that. Now we need to get further into, does the school have the right to expel students for their social media activity? And the answer is it depends. This is where it can get really hard. The article is lacking a lot of critical details. Anybody want to point out maybe what's a detail that you feel like it's lacking? I feel like there's a lot of things. I have a lot of questions. I have more questions than answers because I don't ever want to see somebody racially profiled. But if something inappropriate's happened, then it has to be handled. So, I feel like there's a lot of things that leave me with more questions than answers. Anybody? What would be, if you're a jury, what would be the number one thing you'd want to see? Yes, very good. I want to see the video, right? Let me see the video. Is it just, and I kind of mentioned this in my notes, is it just, yeah, maybe it's inappropriate language. Maybe they're talking about inappropriate, topics. Maybe they're doing that. And maybe as an adult, I'm like, that's not appropriate, but that's not grounds for expulsion, right? You know what I mean? You're just being inappropriate, especially if it's off school campus, you know what I mean? Off school times. But I want to see a transcript. Is there specific threats? Are you mentioning students' names in a derogatory way? Is there threats towards staff? Like, is there illegal activity happening in, are you under 18 and you're drinking? Like if those kinds of things, then it can go into grounds for expulsion. So I think what's lacking is some context. Because if it's just, kids kind of being silly and maybe doing some inappropriate stuff, then that could border on racial profiling, right? Because you're expelling them because you don't like the content, except that there isn't grounds for expulsion. Or are there real threats? Are there real threats and things, which then absolutely there would be grounds, and I don't feel that it's really answered in the court case. So I think it got a stir, but maybe what was a result of that, like the police presence or things like that. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying, Lucy. Yeah. So they also mentioned, the defense mentions that there were more than those four and kids of many different backgrounds, racial backgrounds involved in the incident. 14 kids total. So again, was it all the same related incident? Was it a back and forth on social media, maybe that carried over onto school campus? Because sometimes it starts there, right, and then finishes at the school. So maybe was it a comment or something made on social media, and then was it one group that was united, or was it different groups, pitted against each other? I feel like there's a lot of context lacking. So some of the things that I put, so I'm not going to copy and paste these. You got to kind of make some of these notes, but I'll give to you. We can kind of go over really quick. I said, I think the article is lacking some specifics. The school might have grounds if there's bullying occurring, threats to others, or illegal activity. If it's just cursing, talking about partying, hooking up, money, or, things that are maybe distasteful, then no, they don't. No, they don't. We would need to see a transcript, see the video, or see the social media and how that the evidence of how it carried over into school or lack thereof, to then maybe side with, is this inappropriate profiling of people based on race, or is this a bunch of students that are making threats and have gone too far, where the school does have grounds to limit them, and stuff. So also, being minors, students do not have the full rights of someone 18, and attending a school, you are limited. And so you are limited. Yes. Also the real issue. Also, was the really music or fact? Yes, exactly. Again, there's a lot of gray area, because just because it's offensive doesn't mean that it's grounds for expulsion.
And then I have a question. Like for me, I would say, okay, define offensive. What's offensive?
Yeah.
To you and me may not be to,
Well, and that's where, again, is this just adults that they felt it was distasteful and they're mad about it and it's causing a stir, and so they're going to make an example,
right?
Or which again then could be, this is profiling then, and
right. Like remember, historically back in the 50s, rock and roll was the devil's music, and people were going around breaking records and throwing them out and crunching them in front of people and saying,
right,
we can't allow our youth to be
reckless and crazy.
Yes. It was insanity. Don't let your children listen to rock and roll.
Very good example. Very, very good example. Or are there threats made? Are there student names mentioned? Are there staff made? Is there a threat at the school that maybe is carried over, or an incident that's connected at school that can be linked to the media, the social media in some aspect, maybe indirectly or directly to a video?
Was there really a crime committed?
Well, some things don't warrant a warning. You know what I mean? Like if you threaten somebody, or if you make a threat, like you don't necessarily get a warning. It depends. Sometimes it could warrant a warning, but sometimes not. You know what I mean? It depends on the threat, right? The severity of it and what it's done. So again, sometimes you bypass it. Your warning is don't do it. You know what I mean? Like the warning is you shouldn't do that. So like, I'm not going to warn somebody because they brought a weapon to school. No, you're out. You know what I mean? You don't get a warning. Like your warning is, that you're not supposed to do that. So sometimes I hear what you're saying. Sometimes we can talk about it, warning, but other times it's like, no, like you're done. We're good. So I don't know. And that's the hard one in this. So there's a lot of, I feel like, unknown, but there are times. So again, if it's bullying, direct threats, things like that, absolutely, the school has the right to do that. You don't have to like it. You can feel it's profiling, but if you did direct violations, like I mentioned, then it's not necessarily profiling. It's you did something inappropriate. Or is there lack of that, right? And it's just a bunch of adults that didn't like it and then are targeting these kids to make an example. Absolutely, then you might have grounds for profiling. But again, it's hard to know. Absolutely, it really. I want to see the video or the transcript. the posts,
Yeah.
things like that.
And Ms. Hall, I don't even care about the transcript, unless it's, a deposition and so I want to see what they saw.
Yes, because
that
often
would really
sometimes
be
words on paper aren't the same as seeing a video and the way
right.
it's done
Show
or
me
a
what you thought
gesture.
was so horrible.
That's so
Yeah.
true. That's true.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so let's move to number 2. So hopefully you got enough evidence where you can answer 1 and 2. And again, you don't have to totally agree with myself and Miss Carter, but keep those things in mind. It's easy to jump to conclusions. Someone claims, "Oh, it's racial profiling. It must be." It could be, but what evidence is necessary? You want to think about this from a court opinion, you know what I mean? And what is really going to be necessary to establish if it's profiling or if a violation has happened, and the school had grounds to do that. And as I said, this was 4 parents, 4 Black students, but the defense is claiming that there were more students of different backgrounds included. That's where it's like, I just feel like we need more to make a better idea of this one, and stuff. But that's my opinion. All right. Number 2, read through the First Amendment and give a brief explanation of what it means for students in the worksheet. So we click on this and it gives us a good kind of brief definition, right? So remember, it's freedom of speech, press, assembly, petition, and stuff. So freedom of speech is plays out in so many different ways. Okay. And so on the task sheet, it asks us to, let me scroll down. All right. Give a brief explanation of what the First Amendment means to a student. Okay. So I'll copy and paste and put this in, and you're welcome to use it. So the First Amendment interprets speech and press broadly, but this covers writing and printing and talking, broadcast as well, use of the internet, other forms of expression. Freedom of speech can be symbolic. It can be flags, burning the flags, wearing armbands, burning crosses, things like that. And there have been quite a few court rulings that help us further define this. In 1969, Tinker is going to be one of those, which we'll look in task 3. Okay, so you're welcome to use this one if you want. Now, there are limits on that, all right? Again, it's not just a free pass. Let's look at some of those limits really quick. So limits, false statements that damage someone. So again, this, especially when you go into school, that's going to be limited even more. Threats, to commit a crime or to threaten somebody, like I'm going to come to school and steal, or I'm going to come to school and blow something up, or I'm going to target the teacher. Like you can't do that. Obscenities, so especially in certain contexts, so maybe hand gestures, something that's highly sexual or pornographic, certainly child pornography, anybody under the age of, 17 or under in a sexual content, is not allowed. So the government can restrict speech, especially on students and stuff, especially when you're in certain institutions. So for sure, myself and Ms. Carter's speech, along with your speech, are limited being a part of public education. So when you're a part of public education, you do not get the same rights of freedom of speech as you would in the private sector. Okay, it cut off that second part. So I'll get that again real quick. So even let's say for myself, I have to be really careful what I post on social media when I'm giving an opinion on something or something like that. Because being a teacher, I do, even outside of, it's not like at 311, I can say whatever I want. No, I'm held accountable for that still in the teacher role well after the hours of school. Yeah, so I can't just get on and start, most teachers, you won't get in trouble maybe for saying like, okay, this is how I feel on a political topic, but the way in which you do it. But you got to be really careful. Got to be really, really careful, especially if it's a hot topic, if it's something that could offend people or something like that. I'm certainly protected in saying, oh, this is how I feel. Like let's say it's a court decision. I say I side with this side or that side. But beyond that, you can get yourself in trouble if you attack or if you post or you get more specific than that. You can get yourself in hot water. Okay, let's go to task 3. Okay, let's go to task 3. So task 3 is now task 3 and 4 are going to look into. So 2 kind of broadly defines, right, the First Amendment and that we are certainly limited and what are the parameters of that. And then 3 is read through cases, Tinker versus Des Moines, and write a paragraph or 2. So we're just going to do one about how basically it defines the limitation of those rights. So what I did is I found a quick summary video that we can use. Okay, so we'll use a quick summary video to help. Oh wait, that's the article. Where's my video link? Here it is. Okay, and you should be familiar with this case. We did this case last week and also last semester. So we've looked at this case a couple of times. All right, okay, here is Tinker versus Des Moines. All right. And look for evidence of how they define the speech. So, what type of speech is it? And then how do they define the limits? Okay. So, why does the court side with the students and say that they had the right? What was that rubric? Okay, so to speak.
Well, hey there, and welcome back to Heimlich History. In this video, we're going to look at another one of your required Supreme Court cases for the AP government curriculum, namely Tinker v. Des Moines. So if you're ready to get them brain cows milked, let's get to it. And this is a really interesting case for high schoolers because it very much set the parameters for the freedom of speech that you have on school property. Okay, as always, let's begin with the facts of the case. In 1965, Senator Robert Kennedy called for a Christmas truce in the war in Vietnam, and an activist family called the Tinkers decided that they wanted to support this controversial measure and symbolic protest. To that end, 4 of their children and 1 of their friends made a plan to wear black armbands to school in support of the Christmas truce. Now, to put it mildly, the nation was a piping hot mess regarding the Vietnam War. There were protests and violence, and so this was very much not a neutral issue. So when the school administration heard about the Tinkers' plan, they went ahead and wrote a policy saying that any student wearing a protest armband to school would be asked to remove it or face suspension until they were willing to come back to school without it. And so the Tinker children decided to wear the armbands anyway, and they got suspended, upon which their parents filed suit. So what was the constitutional principle at stake? This was a case about the First Amendment's protection of free speech. Now, remember what I've been saying in all these videos on civil liberties. Our rights are not absolute. There are limits to them. And the question here is whether a student protest on school property, silent and symbolic as it was concerning a highly contentious issue, should be allowed. After all, school administrators do have the responsibility to create a good learning environment as free from conflict as possible. And so was this particular prohibition from the administration a reasonable infringement on the student's right to free speech? Well, to answer the question, let's see how the case was decided. In a 7-2 decision, the court ruled that this was a violation of the student's right to free speech, and while the court acknowledged that there were valid constitutional reasons for an administration to restrict the speech of students on some occasions, this case did not meet the criteria. In fact, the court created what's called the substantial disruption test as a decision-making criterion for how school administrators could constitutionally limit student speech. And basically, it just says that if a school administration is going to restrict student speech, they must be able to demonstrate that the speech in question would, quote, materially and substantially interfere with the requirements of appropriate discipline in the operation of the school. And since the wearing of these armbands caused no material or substantial disruption, it was deemed a violation of the student's First Amendment rights. And that's because, as Justice Abe Ford has stated in the majority opinion, it can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. Okay, now why does this case matter? It matters because it set the parameters for the question of free speech on school campuses and has been cited in many other similar cases to guide justices in their ruling. And before you decide to just go say anything you want at school thinking Tinker will protect you, I should mention that subsequent cases have refined the relationship between students' free speech and the school administration's responsibility to create a conflict-free learning environment. For example, in 1985, a case called Bethel School District v. Frazier took up the question about obscene and vulgar speech at school. In this case, a student gave a speech that was overflowing with sexual innuendos and was disciplined as a result. So in this case, the court decided that vulgar speech on a school campus was not the same as political speech like the students in the Tinker case had engaged in. And so they ruled in favor of the administration in that case and thus decided that there are legitimate restrictions on student speech. Okay, that's
Okay, so I put some notes in the chat. You can kind of think about with this case. Let's look at your task sheet, okay? And let's go to number 3. And the first question is basically, so it says, write 1 or 2 paragraphs. One is find how Tinker's First Amendment rights were violated according to the courts. So basically that the school restricting them from wearing the armbands was a violation of their free speech, okay? We do have limitations though, right? Our rights are not absolute. The armbands, so here's the key distinction, right? This was the key in the rubric, so to speak, that tipped one way or another, okay? So the armbands were not causing or disrupting class, therefore did not meet the criteria to ban their speech or limit their speech in school. Right, the wearing of the armbands was an expression, but gives parameters to the school going forward. Now, if the armbands had, let's say, a middle finger on them or something like that, then that could grounds for that's a vulgar gesture, maybe so. But this was black armbands with a peace sign, so the symbol was not vulgar and it was in a passive way. All right, and they weren't actively protesting; they were sitting in class. They were passively protesting, right, through their symbolic speech. All right. So it is not disrupting the educational environment and it is not vulgar. So the key here is that the focus of school is education, right? And so when your freedoms are not disrupting the educational environment, you should be good. If they are, then that could give the school grounds for limiting or bringing further, case against you if it's disrupting or limiting your speech, if it's disrupting the learning environment. Okay. So, first focus of school is conflict free and to educate. There has to be no threat to the learning environment. So, this was passive speech, passive symbolic speech. The symbol was not vulgar and therefore did not threaten the learning environment. So, the school did not have the right to limit them. So, really quick, in B, what kind of speech is this then? So, somebody write it in the chat for me or unmute. What kind of speech? Is it symbolic, verbal speech, press, protest, or petition? Yes, symbolic. Very good. It's symbolic speech because it's an armband, right? It's got a symbol on it. And they weren't actively outside picketing. Now, maybe they did that before or after school, but they were in class participating, not being disruptive. So it's just a simple armband. Today, people wear lots of bracelets or things like that. Those rubber ones that people hand out all the time for different causes and stuff like that. That could be a sign, and you see, oh, I support that same cause or something like that, So it's passive symbolic speech, right? All right. Very good. Let's go on to number 4. Okay. So number 4 asks us read through the Bethel versus Frazier, which we're familiar with this one. So we'll look at this and how it violated how the courts defined the limitations on speech. So again, I have a video that will summarize it. Okay. Real quick. And then we'll talk about it. And we'll be done for the day. Okay. So part 4, you're going to write one paragraph discussing what the violation was and why the school had the right to limit the student's speech. And then part B, talking about, again, identify what type of freedom or what type of speech it was. Okay, so this is Bethel versus Frazier. And again, we've done this one, so that this should be familiar.
High school senior and champion debater Matthew Frazier had written an innuendo-laden speech nominating another boy for student body vice president. 2 teachers with whom he'd shared a draft had warned him that it was inappropriate, but Frazier was too pleased with his own cleverness not to deliver it at the school assembly. Bethel School District versus Frazier is the United States Supreme Court's take on the school's response to this naughty speech. Frazier's short speech read in part as follows, quote, "I know a man who is firm. He's firm in his pants. He's firm in his shirt. His character is firm. Jeff is a man who takes his point and pounds it in. If necessary, he'll take an issue and nail it to the wall. Jeff is a man who will go to the very end, even the climax, for each and every one of you." Unquote. During the assembly, some students hooted and yelled and made hand gestures. Others looked bewildered. A teacher ended up using class time to discuss Frazier's speech with her students. The next day, the assistant principal summoned Frazier to her office. She informed him that his speech had violated a school rule prohibiting conduct that materially and substantially interfered with the educational process, including the use of obscene or profane language. The school suspended Frazier and removed his name from the list of candidates for graduation speaker. Frazier sought review under the school district's grievance procedures. The hearing officer concluded that his speech was indecent, lewd, and offensive to the modesty of the audience, and affirmed the discipline. Frazier sued the school district in federal district court. The court held that the school had violated Frazier's First Amendment right to freedom of speech and his 14th Amendment right to due process. The Ninth Circuit affirmed, holding that Frazier's use of language to make a point was protected political speech. The United States Supreme Court granted cert.
So the courts ruled that while you have a right to express yourself in the context of school grounds, being vulgar and things like that, you can't just say anything you want. You can't just, and we looked at this court case when we did the Supreme Court, and we also talked about this court case briefly last week. Okay, so we are a little bit familiar with this court case, and I think we even had a little quick discussion that it's pretty, like, I can only imagine, and this was like in the 80s, so if that happened today, I'd see admin moving, somebody go unplug the mic, it would cause a stir. It's so does it substantially interfere with the educational process, including the use of obscene, profane, and gestures? Suggestive speech and inappropriate speech can and will be limited because it can disrupt the learning environment. So these are 2 notes you could use in your paragraph response of why in one case, in Tinker's case, is it okay where it's an armband with a peace sign okay to express yourself about a topic that was quite controversial at the time, the Vietnam War, whether or not we should pull out of the Vietnam War or stay in the Vietnam War. Yet this speech was considered vulgar, inappropriate, and the school district had the right to limit this student's speech. Again, the disruption that it caused, inappropriate language, obscene inappropriate language or gestures, and definitely disruptive to the learning environment, right? I mean, that would cause such a stir, and it's at a school function, so therefore distracting from the purpose of that function, which in this case would be graduation, and stuff, which is a culminating experience. Really quick, what kind of speech do we see? So part B, so you have to do 1 paragraph in task 4, which you can use some of the notes that I talked about. So why, in this case, the courts ruled that the school had the right to limit the speech. What kind of speech do we see in task 4? He's literally standing up and reading from a paper. So what kind of speech would that be? Anybody in the chat? Like pulling teeth today. There we go. Is it passive when he's up reading a paper? He's definitely doing innuendo, so he's not being direct with it, but he's literally, so it would be verbal speech, right? So the type of freedom, yeah, verbal speech, okay? He might be a little bit passive in the fact that he's using innuendos, but I'd say he's actually being very direct. Anybody that is, hit puberty, right, is getting these innuendos, and unfortunately is probably giggling, and the adults are probably turning red, and it's just causing, again, quite a scene and disruption to the learning environment and what the focus of the environment is. Okay. Yeah, so the standards. So verbal speech, right? Your actual verbal speech. So as literal as it can get. Okay, so as we wrap up today, we looked at the project, Are Students Protected by the First Amendment? We looked at the first task, the lawsuit of Black teens unfairly expelled, and talked about, do schools have the right to expel you because of your social media, and kind of what some of those grounds are. Is there a threat made? Is there something illegal happening? Are you directly threatening the school or staff or something like that? Then there can be grounds for that. Or is it profiling? And maybe what we were lacking in detail to make a clear distinction in this case, at least for ourselves as an audience, okay? That would be nice to know. What are some general outlines of the First Amendment, talking and reviewing what those 5 things are, and then looking at specific examples where we see court cases that help to, give us some of those guidelines within school and with students where you are allowed speech, where you can't just cut off speech, but there are limitations on that. We see that with the Frazier case. Okay. So I hope you have a wonderful day. You should be able to get 1 through 4 done. Okay, so I tried to guide you through that. Maybe not giving you all the answer that you copy and paste, but you can certainly use the points that I gave you, all right, to create that paragraph. When you're doing in task 3B, task 4B, you only have to do a sentence, right, for what kind of speech it is. So symbolic for the first one and then verbal for the second one, okay? And then tomorrow we'll do 5 through 8. So we'll just keep cracking through this and hope you get this done. All right, great opportunity to get your grade up and to really score points. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, thank you so much. Bye. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Lucille.
Bye, all.
Bye. Bye, Miss Carter. Have a great day. Bye, Brandon. Bye.